All right, so we're recording for the STI. Now, any questions so far? Feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt as we get going and do some stuff. Cool, everyone's good. Awesome. So one thing I want to go over real quick, and I'll jump back to sharing, is there is this agenda, which is just sort of formality's sake, but also just to give you a sense of some things, going over some basics of, slides, themes, and stuff like that. But then also, a lot of this outside the box type stuff, virtual backgrounds, the virtual classroom, things that will actually be able to be used, right away. The Ignite talks, and this document is also more part of that resource in the sense that there's a ton of links to things that we've done in the past and how kids have done different things, how we've used slides basically without bullet points, how we kind of work to that one image, 6 words, like keep it clean, keep the message clean and clear. And then books and all sorts of different things. So that's basically what that is. The projects eventually will be the folder, or maybe you make a folder with a bunch of demo type things in it, or maybe it's like the one super awesome virtual classroom thing that you make that you put in that folder. But we're not going to worry about that just yet. But what we will do is, so what I want you to do is, and we will try to make this as interactive as it humanly possibly can in this environment. And you don't have to do it right now, but as long as you sort of jot it down, in your drive, I want everyone to make a folder called STI 5460. And then what they're going to do is, that's going to be the folder that you're going to make things in. And that's going to then serve as sort of that project database, so to speak, for yourself. Might be the type of thing where, you make that folder, and I'm going to show you how we do the workbooks. You may say, oh, I want to try that. So you'll go into that folder, you'll try it. Even if it doesn't become a full cohesive workbook, then at least you have an example of sort of how you kind of played around with that, or ways you can manipulate it. Same thing, we're going to make the virtual classroom, start it in that folder, and then that way you can kind of play around and not have to worry about it being somewhere else. If it turns out to be good, you could always do the make a copy of it where it goes somewhere else, or you can do the Shift Z and have it in both your lesson folder as well as this STI folder. But this STI folder will essentially act as that end repository project that you'll basically be turning in. And it might just be a folder with a collection of things you've tried throughout the weekend, or it might end up being one thing that you did crazy amounts of work on, and it's not the folder so much as it's this one file that you really sort of fleshed out. Cool. Questions? Everyone good? You guys are all just content to stare at me and let me ramble for an hour every couple of days? Get the credit? Yeah, that's what we thought. Gotcha. All right. So what I will do is I will keep going. So the workbooks.
Not just about the credit, Chris. It's the intense learning. We're all just intensely listening.
Of course it is. All right. So the workbook thing is, if you have, and I have on the blog, and I linked to it in that presentation as well, but it's a little bit further down, but it's about these sort of editable worksheets. And essentially what happens is, especially in these distance learning environments, is we get PDF files, and we want people to be able to do something to the PDF file, but they can't because they don't have the app, or they don't have the thing, or the iPad, or whatever it is. And you don't want it to be like a printout situation. So what's cool about, there's a little bit of work involved in this, but it's one of those things where you can kind of create that baseline. If you have a PDF book, let's say, that you're using every year, you spend the hour once to turn that PDF book into a Google Slides book, then you have it forever and it's done. And then you can always just make copies of it or share it with kids as a copy. And what it is essentially, there's this huge thing about it, but you're basically taking a PDF and you're turning it in, each page of a PDF, into a picture. And then you just take this image and then put it in the background of a Google Slide file. So what I'll do is I'll show you what that looks like real fast. So I'm going to go to Drive, and I'll jump into my folder. And as we're doing this, feel free to get up, go get a drink, interrupt, unmute yourself, do whatever you got to do to survive this hour. So let me jump into my folder. So if I make, if I go new, and I'll call it workbook demo. Oh wait, not a new folder, sorry. This is what happens after a day of Zooms. And so I'll call it workbook demo. Now, as I'm making this, so I look at this and I say, all right, like I'm starting it out, and Google always wants you to have, choosing themes and stuff like that. I'm never a fan of doing these for a number of reasons. One is I'm a huge believer in white background, black text, making it stand out and making the content be sort of king. Also, I think, again, going back to that one word or one image, 6 words type thing, is that like, we want to be able to focus on the thing that's on there and not focus on, I call it the rainbows, unicorns, and fireworks, which is all that other nonsense behind it, like the fun fonts and, cute colors. I'm of the belief that regardless of student age or regardless of purpose, we're designing this thing, right? So there should be a sense of design about it, and it shouldn't be, well, I'm just going to put this up because it's fun or it's colorful. 2 of the things that we always have, and I always have it up in the lab at Heathcote, is could versus should and want versus need. Like, make purposeful decisions so that your audience is getting the information from this thing and not just going, oh, well, like they know how to change font color. It's like, okay, well, what about the content? So I generally just sort of X all that stuff out. Now, the workbook is an example of where we would take a page and we'd have to rotate it, because if I were to find a PDF file, which I probably should have had prepared. Oh, I know what we'll do. Here, we'll look at this one. This is my PDF file of my Con Ed bill. So I have this PDF file, and they'll be thrown off by the time it's for like 4 months in my apartment, and I don't have to pay for it. The building, it's a long story. Anywho, that's why I lost power for like 6 hours once during e-learning, which was fun. So I have this PDF file. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to File, and I'm going to Export. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to save it as a PDF. I'm going to save it as a JPEG. So what it's going to do is it's going to turn that page. So let's call it, I don't know, oops. We'll call it Bill page 1, right? I can make it super high quality and press save. So then what'll happen is over here, generally somebody's going to say, well, all right, like somebody's going to come in and say, okay, well, I'm going to put this, I'm going to drag it. All right. So then there's a couple of problems with that. The first problem is that then I have all this extra space. Now, maybe you want that because maybe what you want to do is you want to have this over here and you want the kids to put in text boxes next to it to to explain understanding. Maybe you want them to put shapes next to it, and talk about, reasons why, whatever it may be. They can, this little arrow right here, you can use an arrow and, you can point things out. The little line, we can make the arrow thicker, change the color of the line. We can do these things, right? Now, this is cool because we can now have this PDF file where I can kind of manipulate it. Except if I were to share this file with the kids so that they could put these things on there, they could also take this and they can delete it. So it sort of defeats the purpose, because if they may delete it accidentally. The other thing is the sizing may be off and they say, I can't see it. So then they're dealing with having to use a magnifying glass. You don't necessarily want that. So instead, what I recommend is using this picture as a background so they can't manipulate it. However, backgrounds are funky little beasts. They're right here. You can put a background on a slide and you can choose an image and we can upload, and we'll put that bill up there. Now, I say done. Now, here's the problem, though. Backgrounds, what Google does with a background is it doesn't care what your image looks like. it's going to stretch it to fit that slide. So we don't want to do that because then it's going to jack it up and it's not going to look right. So this would be a situation where what you want to do is you want to do this file page setup and change it to 8.5 by 11. Because then if you do that, and actually this little drop down up here, I'm going to just choose a blank. So I have a blank one. So now if I do a background and I choose that image, I say done. Now that's in there, it actually looks like a piece of paper and it looks like the document, and I click on it, nothing happens. So I can't jack it up. Now the kids, for the most part, they probably know that it's a background, but they don't instinctively know it. So they won't generally go, oh, let me go to background and delete it, because that's like sort of too much work. Like if you told them to add a background, they could know how to do it, but I found that they generally don't think that it's a background and then think to go undo it. So it's like one of those things where even though it's not like secure or locked, it's still not something that's going to get mucked around with very much. But then the premise still holds is that you then could come over here and you take a shape and highlight something, covers it, but you can go to the paint bucket and do a transparency. You can go to the line and make it red. You can go to the line, make it thicker. So this would be a way where you could turn this worksheet, this workbook, into an editable PDF with Google Slides. Now it's a bit of a hassle because you have to do one page at a time, sort of saving out the pages from your PDF file. But flip side to that is it's in Google, so that once you do it once, it's done. And then you could, mark up and, drop arrows down and put in, I like shapes for text because all shapes are text boxes. But what I like about it is you can kind of set your size, or you can put a text box. Somebody have a question?
Yeah, Chris, I just wanted to ask, can you put like pre-made shapes on the page too for them to drag around?
Sure.
Because I know I've done that in a regular situation, but not in this custom page.
Yeah. So like if I wanted to, I can have, I don't know, let's say Pac-Man, right? I can have a bunch of Pac-Mans just like on the side. And then when I go to share this file out, whatever's on the side doesn't show up on the actual file until they actually drag it over. So yeah, you can have a collection of shapes sitting on the side of this file, and you could be asking them, maybe the PDF is like just a header with some directions, and then you could be asking them to drag the documents over. And then that's why, like, once you sort of make this, you kind of leave this as your master file. So then time goes on, you just do file, you can make a copy. And then that way you have like one original that's clean and perfect. And then you have another original, or you have a copy of the original that's what you use to share with kids. Or what you can also do is when you're doing this, and this goes to one of the things that's in the agenda, is when you share, you can, under advanced, when you're in here private, right now, I see it, you can change this, you can do anyone with a link or Scarsdale Public Schools or Edgemont. And when they see it, they'll still be, if they're allowed to view it, they'll still be able to make a copy of it. What you could, just by going to file, make a copy, then they can have their own. So it'd be the type of thing where you could put it up there, you can share it just on where it's view only, and part of your directions to the kids is, click this link, you're going to see it. You don't have the ability to edit. I want you to go to file, make a copy. You make a copy, they all have their own clean version. So if they jack it up, doesn't matter. You still have that nice clean master, that nice clean original that you shared. What you can also do, and this is a little bit of a trick, is in these links, like any of these sharing links, right? If you look up here, there's the word edit right here. When you get a link, so let's say I was to change this and I was to make this public, and then I say save, and I say done. When I grab that link, actually, let me copy this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'll get an incognito window, so I'm not logged in, and I'll paste it. But instead of leaving all that edit sharing stuff at the end, I'm going to change it to the word copy. So you can basically get that sharing link, delete everything past that last slash and change it to the word copy. And then you give them this link. And when that happens, it's going to force them to make a copy. So like, for instance, what I'll do is, just so you guys can experience it, is in the chat, I'm going to paste it, but then I'm going to do copy. So if you want, you can actually click on the link I just put in the chat and you'll see how it's going to force you to make a copy of that file. Doesn't even give you the option to view it. So that's a way to basically force a copy upon the children. Now, Scarsdale, it's a little bit easier. We use Hapara where you can push it out. You know, if you're using Google Classroom, it essentially makes a copy by like, you know, putting an assignment up there. But this is a nifty little trick, hack, whatever you want to call it, where you know that like you can just give somebody the link. And as long as you kind of erase that whole edit equals question mark sharing nonsense at the end and just make it say the word copy, it'll force a copy upon the person once they do it. And then obviously you can say no or delete the copy. You don't need to keep a copy of that for any reason.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Does that work only for people within, like that have a Google account?
They have to have a Google account because
okay, so then kindergarten and first grade, this isn't going to really work because the kids don't have. That
is correct. But if, let's say, you're making something that you're going to push out to like the parents, or if there was a, you know, for some reason you want to make something that you didn't want the parents to have the original copy of, you could do it. Like, let's say it's a yearbook, right? Like you got a collection of a bunch of pictures. You did it in Google Slides, because, and I'll show you in a minute, sort of where the whole functionality of the different shapes comes really into play. You could do it and say, listen, I'm going to give this to you, but here's the link. It's going to force you to make a copy to save into your own Google Drive. So you can do that. Like, it's not just about the kids necessarily. This works for basically anybody who has a Google account, depending on purpose. Now, for you guys as kindergartners, you're probably going to make something that you're just going to do the sort of on public to like see, because your kids aren't manipulating these, or your kids aren't working with these. They're just viewing them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. It's just that I was just trying to think, like, if we sent something out for the parents, we still can't do it because not all the parents have Gmail accounts.
Right. And that's the thing, is you just have to, I mean, you know, all of these things are all these little sort of possibilities, and it's going to very much depend on your environment. You know, like high school obviously is going to be a little bit different than, you know, second grade in terms of what instructions go out or how complex the thing is. You know, the high school teachers might have massive, you know, 50-page Google files for, you know, editing and turning back in. Kindergarten, you guys might just be doing quick tutorials that you're putting up, and that's why you're using Google Slides. You know, when we get into the comic books, for making the comic books, now the kids can't make them in those lower grades, but for like your K-1 teachers, it might be fun to make these comic books or these virtual classrooms for the kids, just as a visual for them to see and sort of interact with. So again, it's all this stuff is about purpose. So I'll share this again.
Chris, can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
It seems like what you're describing with Google Slides is similar to when you're in Google Docs and you insert a drawing. One of the problems I have, I could spend hours working on a diagram for one of my tests. And now that we're all in Google, I'm not using Word anymore, so it's really hard. So what I will do is take an image maybe from Google and put it into a drawing, save it. And it sounds like what you're explaining too is similar, that you make it a JPEG, then I can manipulate it onto the test. But it sounds like I can do the same. Am I saying the same thing similar? Because now I might use Google Slides too.
Yeah, so it's going to be easier. And we'll get into the Google Drawing aspect in a minute. Is Google, I don't like Google Docs for anything. Like if you're doing anything other than, but that also goes for Microsoft Word. Yeah. I don't like word processors because all they care about is the text. The text is king. So like they are not gonna, like anything that happens is gonna jack the text up, or anything that happens has to like happen within the confines of the text. So you're gonna be limited to how big something can be or where the caption can go or whatever it is, because like the text is the 99.9% like component. why I like Google Slides is that there doesn't matter. Everything has, and I'll show you in a second when I share again, how everything's just in a box. So you can more easily manipulate and move things around in these boxes and have things overlap in a much easier way to make things like that more simple.
Thank you.
No
Thanks.
problem. Patricia, you have your little blue hand up. You have a question?
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties, but I wanted to ask about copying. When you force the copy, I'm sorry, my internet cut out for like 2-3 minutes, but what I found that when I have like kids, I don't want to make them a copy, but I want them to make their own copy on their own, for example, so they don't duplicate my work or something like that. But my question is, when they don't rename it, and I'm doing this through Google Classroom, and I don't know if this is an issue that you guys were talking about with Google Slides, is that I can't find my original because sometimes they won't like change the name, or they'll take out the word copy of, and then I get a bunch of them in my file, and then I'm like, wait, that's not my original, that's theirs.
So that's where you would look in Drive. Like
Okay.
every Google Classroom makes its own folder inside of the Classroom folder. And that's where you go into Drive and actually go into that folder if it's getting muddled, especially at the high school level, if you have like 200 kids or something.
Yeah.
Because then in Google Classroom, in that folder, you'll see all the things named the same, but then the right-hand column, it'll say created by. It'll have like the owner's name. So that's where then you'll be actually going through and figuring out who owned it or who created it.
Like if I just want to get back to my original one that I want, so I can reuse it as a template for them for the following week. And
So if you want to get back to the original one, what I recommend in that situation is that's where something like the Shift Z works, right? Where you create all of your originals in your own folder, your own place outside of Google Classroom. So it exists in your, lesson 10 folder. When you add it to Google Classroom, it's going to add it into there, but it's still going to be in that lesson 10 folder. So worst case, you just go back to your original lesson book that's outside of Google Classroom, and then you should be able to find your original.
Same with the slides then, right? So I want to keep all my original
all your
slides.
originals in one place. Yeah. One thing you can do too, and this is fine, this is all goes to like the same stuff, is when you're doing this, when you're in here and you do a search for something in Google Drive, you could search by user. So you could find by me, essentially. Like I just want to see all this owner, me. So I want to find everything that's owned by me. You could do owned by me and then,
the name of it or
the
something.
name of the thing of it. And you can even use this little drop down, this little triangle right here.
Yeah.
So you could say, all right, I want to go look at presentations owned by me and that, let's say I modified yesterday.
Okay.
And I can do a search, and hopefully none because it was Sunday.
Okay.
But you can do that where you can actually find things in a very granular way that way. That would probably be the easiest thing to do.
Okay.
In terms of mixing and matching with like JPEGs and stuff, so I just use that JPEG for the PDF as a background for this, so you could annotate the PDF, essentially, put a text box on or shape. Again, I like the shapes because when you do a shape, I can do a circle, it brings it in, and every shape is a text box. You just have to enlarge it or shrink it. I don't like using the actual text box thing because when you click the text box and you click down here, it makes this huge long box. And if you wanted to fill this in with paint, it takes over the whole thing. And then like you're resizing and you're doing all this other stuff to try to fix it. What I really like about using shapes in this context is that as soon as you grab the shape to put it in, you just drag it out. I want it to be that big. It's automatically filled in with a color, and you just start typing and it's already there. So it saves and it cuts down on a lot of those extra steps. And then like some people said, like with different shapes, you could have the part of the directions for the kids can be like, put circles over here and squares over here and rectangles over there. And there's a whole bunch of them in here. There's even these thick arrows, curved arrows. The arrows get a little bit funky because they're a shape, so they're big, and there's a thickness to them. When using arrows, I actually prefer the line arrow, which is this drop down, because they give you they're more manipulatable because they're thinner. Because when you do this, this is the outline and the fill. Like it's got both, whereas this is just a line thickness. It doesn't actually change, you know, like this, you go like this, it's still going to have a thickness to it, like a hollow center, tasty core. Whereas this is a little bit neater, in my opinion, but it's my little sort of design nature. And the standpoint of like using images and sort of doing messing around like that. Let me just get a new, so I'll do a new blank one. So what I like about Google Slides, again, in difference or deference to Google Docs or word processing, is that everything is in a box, right? So if I do a shape, which we've seen, shape is in a box. I can do a text box, right? And even though it's floating there, if I click on it, I see that it's in a box. If I put an image in, search the web, and I do a picture of, I don't know, let's do a picture of Scarsdale. Just take this, insert this. The picture is also in a box. They're all in boxes. So you can use these corners. Don't use the middle. If you use the middle, it'll stretch it or squish it. So you don't want to use those middle ones on an image. They're fine to use on a shape to change the characteristics of the shape from a square to a rectangle or an oval to a circle. But on a picture, you always want to just take the corners. But what's nice about this is I can say, all right, I have this, and I'll put it over here. Oops. And then I got to move your heads out of the way. So let's say I have this down here and I'm going to line it up. I have this. You know what? I don't like this. I can delete it. I want this to be my caption. I can pick this up and I can move this on top of the picture. Now, it's behind the picture, right? Because I did the newest thing is at the top. I did that shape first. So it's naturally in the back, but no big deal. I just click on the picture and I go to arrange, order, send to back. So now I can put that right on top of it. I can have the picture floating like this, where it's just a white edged picture on a white background. Or I can click the picture and I can actually do a border. So
that's what I saw her. That's what she was saying about it being maybe easier to work here than trying to do a Google Docs drawing. I had the same issue too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would do it like this. And in fact, I would not even use the drawing inside of Google Docs ever, because you can't get it out. Or maybe now you can, but when they first came out with that feature, if you did a drawing inside of Google Docs, you couldn't pull it out. Like there was no way to get it out. My feeling is if you want to do a drawing, what you would do is you would just in that like folder, just do new. Whoops. You go to new, you go to more, and just do, oh, your heads are in the way. More, and then Google Drawings. And I would make just an innate Google drawing in here. Yes, Ms. Millard, question.
Hey, Chris. I think I missed this before when you were talking about the shape and you circled your name on the PDF from Con Edison. How did you get it so that you saw your name? And is something to do with arranging again, or?
So a little bit with arranging, because the picture as a background is essentially like wallpaper. So you can never mess with the picture. So anything I do is going to be on top of it.
Oh, okay, right.
But if I put this here, I've now put this shape half over that circle, because that text box where I wrote the words text box, the shape is newer. So it goes on top.
Right.
Now, if I want to move and reorder these things, I would click on one of them, or let's say I click on the circle. I'll go to arrange, order, and in this case, I would bring it to the front. And then now that I bring it to the front, you can see that now it's actually cutting through that box.
Okay.
So you can layer images, which is a nice segue to this, which isn't so much Google Slides, but because we're talking about shapes and drawings and how we can kind of manipulate these things differently than normal, is you can, and the easiest way to do it and represent it is a snowman. So I got this snowman, right? Now, problem with my snowman is that he's got this weird sort of middle line. Anyone know how you get rid of that little line? No, because nobody does, because that's why I have a job. No, I'm just kidding. So
I think I might have an idea. Do you make one transparent and the other one not?
it's close, because if I did this, and if I clicked on this and I made this line transparent, then what happens is it does it for the entire one. It looks a little bit funky.
But you can like the coloring of it, the fill of the.
So if I did the fill and I made that transparent,
Oh no.
then it looks a little bit funky. Now, this also goes to things like Venn diagrams potentially. What you have to do is you have to think about these, and this could be really cool from a layered contextual standpoint, where it's not just slapping things together. There's a little bit more thought process that goes into this. So you actually have to put a third one on there. And what you do with the third one is the third one goes over the space that you want to hide. And then on this one, you do transparent line. So then it disappears. So it's there, and it's just about layering shape. So I can extend it out a little bit in either direction, and it goes away. This is, again, how you might play around with like a Venn diagram, where you would have to change the colors. You'd have to sort of toss in an extra shape in the middle of it. Now, where does this sort of become relevant? This becomes relevant in here, where if I look at this, what I've done is to sort of jump ahead from the. So this guy, this version of me, I did in Google Slides with just a bunch of different shapes and colors. And then I put him into, so I did him in Google Drawing. I could have done him in Google Slides, but I wanted to just kind of have the drawing part sort of out off to the side. Once I was done with the drawing, I was able to just take just my character from Google Drawing and paste him into a Google slideshow. And then what that allowed me to do was move my character around. And if I felt like it, I can now click on my guy. I don't want him to be this big. I can make my guy smaller. I can make him more miniature, right? So you can, and that's how, again, everything is in a box in Google Slides. So it gives you more freedom to move things around and manipulate things. In the context of this, with this Con Ed bill, I took that JPEG, I took that PDF page, I saved it out as an image, and I put it in the background so I can't mess with it by itself. But I can certainly drop shapes on top of them and have these shapes sort of stand out as annotations on top of this. So this is handy in a situation where if you don't think the students, let's say, have access to an app for editing a PDF, but they have Google Slides, you could do this, and then that way they can essentially have that. Now, at the elementary level in Scarsdale, our students have Cami, so they can actually edit directly on or annotate directly on a PDF. But I don't think Scarsdale Middle School or Scarsdale Middle School has notability. Scarsdale High School, though, I don't think you guys have Cami. But any of you Scarsdale High School folks can correct me if I'm wrong. And I don't know what Edgemont has access to. But this is a way where you can kind of take a little bit of time, take your PDF file, pull out the pages you want as images, put them in the background, and then you could have people annotate on top, and then it just goes on top of the PDF file. Yeah.
Chris, could I interrupt for a quick second?
Go ahead.
Kind of going back to the little character that you made. If you have multiple pieces that made up that character, like I've been trying to have the kids move some things around on a slide, and it's two or three items together that I've been like grouping. Is this a better way to do it? Draw it out first, and as opposed to grouping, because when they try to move it, if they grab it wrong, it all falls apart.
So a little bit of both. So like when I make the character, what I do is, let's say I know that the character is going to go into my Google Drawing or my Google Slides eventually. So like why? Because, and we'll get more into this later, but like if we go down to like some examples, I got them somewhere, or maybe I don't. I thought I had examples of. Oh yeah, here we go. So like this is like we did this a couple of years ago. So third graders basically made these cultural universals where they had real images and then they put these characters that they made into Google Slides. So what they did was they did the characters totally separate in Google Drawing because we didn't want to have that issue of mixing and matching things.
Okay.
We also knew that they were going to be in different settings depending on where they were in this tour guide. So we didn't want to like have a speech bubble when we made the character, because the speech bubble might be on different sides depending on the slide.
Hmm.
So this would be a situation, if you're making something or they're creating something, you may mix and match, where if I take this and I say, all right, I'm going to make this into my snowman, but what I want to do is I want to draw this out, but I want to make this white. I'm going to make some eyeballs, and then I'm going to give him some weird, I don't know, like teardrop eyeballs. I'm going to do this, but I'm going to make it green eyes, because why can't my snowman have green eyes? Then I would highlight, just drag and highlight those two things, arrange, group. Now I have one eyeball. Now I can copy and paste that. Now I have two identical eyeballs. And maybe I know that my eyeballs are going to be exactly that far apart. I can then just drag and highlight those things, and then I can keep grouping. So now I have one set of eyeballs that goes on my, and that red line means I'm in the center. And that red line is going to show up in it's going to show up on Google Slides and Google Drawing. It's going to help you line things up. So that's in the center of that particular shape. Now, if I slide it over a little bit, you see that there's multiple red lines because different things are centered differently. When that red line goes all the way to the top and bottom, that means it's centered on the whole page or the whole slide. So if I come over here, this is centered on that top circle, which means that top circle is not centered on the page. If I come this way, that's centered on the bottom circle. That's not centered on the page. So none of my stuff is centered, but I'm doing a snowman in Google Drawing, right? So there's that. And then I can come over here and, I don't know, let's give him a smile. So that's a smile. I don't know, let's make the smile yellow, because why not, right? Use this little ball right here, and I'll rotate a little bit. So my goofy snowman. So now what I would do is, because I know that this is the end of my guide, I have all these other pieces in hidden. I'm just going to do like a Command A, select all, and you can actually see that it shows you these hidden pieces. And then I will group this whole bit. Now I'm going to copy this, and then now what I'll do is now I'll bring this in and I'll put this here. So now this is one piece that I can make smaller, and I can now move around the page without having to screw it up. So depending on your purpose, if you're not doing a ton of sort of artistic stuff, you may want to have them say, listen, when you come in here and you make a Venn diagram on slides, my mouse, make it, I don't know, let's say we do that and one of these is transparent. Once it's done, then just select those two things and group those two things. And that way they'll size together, and then you can move them around. And again, that means, this means I'm centered on the whole page because it goes top to bottom. If I bring it down, this means I'm lined up with the top of the other box. This means I'm lined up. What does that mean I'm lined up with? Oh, I have another object on there. But there's just ways to move these things around and make them manipulatable. So that's that. So that's like basic worksheet and basically creating a bunch of things and moving them around. That's using file, page layout to change the rotation. We used custom to make it 8.5 by 11 if you want to make something look like a sheet of paper. About using Preview if you have a Mac, or Adobe Reader if you have a PC, to do a file export, to export that page as a JPEG. And then what we did was we put this JPEG in the background, and that's how we were able to annotate on top of it without messing up the image itself.
Chris, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
Could you show us again how you changed the aspect ratio? Because I tried this a minute ago, and the background came out the wrong ratio.
So here's the deal with that. What you want to do is you want to change the ratio before you put the thing in the background, because otherwise you're going to start jacking up the thing that's in the background. So what I did was I went to File and I went to Page Setup. Now it's going to default to widescreen 16 by 9. See, it's all jacked up and wonky. And then you see like everything else, then even the visual of these things are more hidden over here and stuff. Because this is more presentation style, right? This is more like what's on the television. But if we're trying to sort of approximate and fake like a workbook, we go to File, Page Setup, And instead of widescreen, we have to choose custom. And then we change it to 8.5 by 11. And obviously you can even do 8.5 by 14 if you want to do legal, or you can even turn it the other way if you wanted the piece of paper to be more like a timeline going across.
So if I started with like a screenshot and I'm not really sure what the dimensions of it are, then I mean, should I do it a different way or?
Yes, never. My general rule of thumb is never use a screenshot unless it's absolutely the only way to get something. So what I mean by that is, like, if you have a picture on the computer, you don't need to take a screenshot of the picture because you have the picture. If you have a file, like a document, there are ways to extract that as native files. Because you're right, when you take a screenshot of something, you don't necessarily know what that format is. So what kind of file did you take a screenshot of, John?
It was a web page. It was the results of something that I was, on a web page. So it was just a window within the web page.
So what you can do with that is there's a couple things you can do depending on the web page. So, I mean, I don't know. Whoops. Wrong button. There we go. So depending on the web page, let's go to like NewYorkTimes.com. Depending on the web page and depending on what the resulting thing is that you want, you could actually just do a Command P, like a print, and it'll save it as a PDF. So depending on how it's structured, obviously this is a good example of what you couldn't do, because it kind of gives you these weird, lines in the middle, and it kind of messes it up. But then you also, you could also do individual pages, but you could save it as a PDF. So when you did the Command P on the page, if it looked good, I would say save it as a PDF. And then when you have the PDF open, do the file export and export each individual page as an image file to put it in the background. Might not work. If it doesn't work, what you want to try to do to kind of fake it is you can, let me get out of this. What you can try to do to fake it is try to get your window sort of as clean as possible. Like we don't want that. And then you want to think about, like, all right, like if I'm looking at this obviously looks wider than like an 8.5 by 11. This is more like a wide screen based on what I have on the screen itself. So you could do like a Command minus or like a Control minus to then basically take away like the zoom, like zoom out, like pull out on it. So it starts to become looking a little bit more in that aspect ratio. So you might have to play around a little bit and we say like, all right, this may be as close as I'm going to get. And then you can do a targeted screenshot. Now what that is not taking a whole picture of the screen, but like on a Mac, it's Command-Shift-4, and it gets you this little target. And then what you would do is you would just kind of drag it out. But you would also know that this is not going to be a perfect 8.5 by 11, that there's going to be some stretch to this because, it's not proper. We're sort of winging it. We're going to just try to approximate it. That's why the best thing to do is if you can get like the PDF version of something, or if you can do a print. And sometimes some websites, and this is a little bit of a trick, some websites, like even like Google. So Google gives you this little printer icon, which can be different than the file print icon up here. Because sometimes if you do the file print, it's all jacked up and it looks funky. Sometimes what you can do is inside of the app itself, if there's a little printer icon, that means it's going to strip out all the funkiness and it's going to make it look good. So in this case, I would actually look for, maybe not on the home page, but like the New York Times on an article might even have like a little print icon. Or sometimes if you have one of those like little reader apps like plugged in where it strips out the ads and stuff. I guess New York Times is bad because I'm not signed in. But look for a little print icon inside of the web page because it might actually then give it to you. It's almost like when you get the email confirmation for something, and instead of going to file print, you click print in the email message. It gives you like a clean version of it. You would essentially do that. You're just not printing to paper. You're printing to a PDF.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So I want to be cognizant of time. Plus, I have another Zoom I have to go to. So it's 5 o'clock. So hopefully this was good, and hopefully valuable. So the only homework, everyone has to make that folder. Just call it STI. I don't know what it is. What are we? 40, 5404, 5460. Just call it STI 5460. Share it with me, so just so I have access to it. If you want in there, if you want to create a slideshow and like rotate something and try putting a picture on the back and just try annotating, like faking a workbook, doesn't have to be a complete body of work, just an experiment. If you feel like making a Google drawing character or something, go for it. And that's basically it between now and Thursday. And then Thursday, we'll get a little bit more into how you can use these things for talks. Use them as like Ignite or TED Talks, like with backgrounds. And then I'll show you even how you can record those remotely. So we're going to talk a little bit like as if we were in school, but definitely we're going to hedge this and tweak this to like the whole distance learning aspect, like how you can have kids record themselves remotely doing a timed presentation and stuff like that. Cool.
Very.
Everyone good? Feel free to email me questions. Feel free to check out that blog and the presentation. If not, I'll see everyone Thursday at 4.
Thanks,
Cool.
Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.